You're with Laurella Cousins
Just lovely.
on ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory.
Yeah, you hearing that? That is the sound of me on the horn as the maniac in front of me gets on the brake and goes from 80k to 40 in under 5 seconds. It is, without doubt, the bane of my life. What's the speed limit, and why is it that speed limit is in certain areas? I do understand 40 kilometres in school zones, but why? Why? For instance, does it go from 80 k's along, as I say, Lee Point Road, then to 70, then to 60, on the same stretch of road with the same urban build-up? I'm thinking revenue raising for the government maybe? A known black spot for accidents maybe? I don't know, but it irks the heck out of me. And that's why I'm asking you, is there a road speed in your neck of the woods that catches you out? 0487 99 1057. Ron in Darwin City has shared Dickwood Drive, drives him nuts. Westonia Avenue going into Palmerston for Deb. And from Cam in Palmerston says Kirkland Drive at Tivendale, 100 k's. For some, they can't get over 70 k's, really? When it clearly states, Cam, 100 k's. People don't get that. They don't understand the numbers. It is hugely frustrating. Right now, there are 5 jurisdictions across the country who are trialling or planning 30 kilometres an hour speed limits. And all I can think is government revenue gone mad. Nanny state going crazy. What would low speed, like 30 kilometres along a street, achieve other than making people frustrated when they're driving, which I think would cause more accidents, not increase road safety? Well, clip on your seatbelt and prepare to put your foot on the brake, because new research shows that lower speed limits, yes, create safer streets, but they also create more livable cities, lower crime rates, more physical activity, greater social connection, and increases the spend in local businesses as well as lower pollution. What? Tepi Mclaughlin. He is a PhD candidate, School of Medicine and Public Health at the University of Newcastle. Oh, there is so much to talk about here, Matthew. I think we need to start with a few of the myths around 30 kilometre speed limits. I think that many people feel that reducing the street limit to 30k an hour is just revenue raising. What has your research found?
Indeed, yeah. No, that's right, Laurel. And there's a little bit of confusion out there as to what we're talking about when we're talking about 30k speed limits. Definitely share people's confusion when we're going from, say, 110 down to 100, and then all of a sudden it's 80 and back up to 90. That can, cause confusion for people. What we're talking about here is a default urban speed limit of 30 kilometres an hour in residential areas, in school zones, and in high pedestrian areas where people do a lot of shopping. Now, people might go, wow, that's way too slow. Well, actually, it's required in terms of safety, because we know if you get hit at 40, if you get hit at 50 kilometres an hour, you've got a 60 or a 90% chance of death.
Oh, hang on a minute, because right now in school zones it is 40 kilometres. Are you saying that that's now not good enough and it has to be reduced by another 10 k's for road safety?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're exactly saying that. We've taken a lot of the research from around the world and some of the trials that are happening in Australia. We found that 40 kilometres an hour just isn't slow enough in terms of reducing serious injuries, which are costing the government billions of dollars a year. And also, of course, there's that harm issue that the families and the people that experience road trauma have got to deal with. So it's kind of a massive safety issue to get down to 30 kilometres an hour as a default urban speed limit. So hopefully when you're on a residential street or you're on a shopping street, you'll just know and you'll just get used to the fact that that's 30 kilometres an hour, but we typically actually don't spend a lot of time on those types of streets. So one of the big myths is that it'll massively increase our journey times. And actually that's just not the case, because most of our journeys are not completed on these types of streets. They're completed on arterial roads and on freeways. So reducing the speed limit in our neighbourhoods and around school zones isn't going to make a massive difference to our journey time.
I have to say that here in the Northern Territory, we are a little sensitive when it comes to speed limits, because many Territorians support open speed limits, and were pretty upset back in 2016 when the ALP government reintroduced 130 kilometre speed limits, so ending open speeds on Territory roads. So it's fair to say that reducing the speed limit, doesn't matter if it would be in an urban area or out on our major highways, not a popular idea for many people. How do you get it over the line?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think one of the issues is people aren't necessarily aware of the risk of driving a car at fast speeds and the risk to people that are on the roads trying to cross the roads. So speed is actually the main contributor, more so than, say, alcohol, drunk driving or drug driving or fatigue when it comes to the contributors to road trauma. We know that it's the number one killer of young people. So it's the number one cause of death in people up to the age of 14. And that's just horrifying, that there's 1,100 Australians dying each year on the roads because we haven't quite got our speed limits right, we haven't quite got our education right, we haven't quite got our enforcement right. There's lots of little things that we need to tweak as part of a big picture thing towards road safety.
ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory. My name's Laurella Cousins, and with you is Tepi Mclaughlin. He is a PhD candidate. He is with the School of Medicine and Public Health with the University of Newcastle, and we are talking about the fact that in a number of jurisdictions around the country, they are introducing 30-kilometre speed limits in built-up areas. Now, I have to say, I have been talking about this, and Deb is talking about traffic lights. There are multiple sets of traffic lights in less than a K or so along one section of road going into Palmerston called Roystonia Avenue. Do traffic lights help reduce speed rather than putting in speed limits, traffic lights instead?
That's a really interesting one, and it's kind of a little bit of old school thinking. The more traffic lights you add, the easier it is for people to cross the road. We just know that people are going to cross the road where they cross the road. If people want to go to the shop on the other side of the road, they'll cross directly there, or a lot of people will. So we know that kind of that just adding more and more traffic lights and more pedestrian crossings, eventually the whole road will just be a big traffic light central. And obviously nobody wants that. One of the benefits, actually, to do with traffic lights of 30 km/h speed limits in these residential areas and shopping streets is that you actually remove the need for some of them in some cases. So you can improve traffic flow by reducing the speed. People stop, start. First thing, that's really bad for, using up petrol and air pollution. But the second thing is that you don't need to keep going stop, start. If you're going at 30 k's an hour, we can improve the traffic flow, maybe reduce the number of traffic lights in some areas if we reduce the speed limit.
Wes is in a suburb called Howard Springs here in the Northern Territory. Wes, you've got an idea you wanted to share with Matthew about speed. What's that?
Well, I've flagged it to the government many times, but nothing ever happens. It's the change of speed limit that's annoying and difficult to catch on, and that's where I think it's revenue raising, that they could paint the speed limit on the road, and have one of those little bumps that doesn't do any damage to your car, just a little jolt to say, yeah, there's a change of something, and that would announce the change of speed limit.
That's a really interesting idea.
Over to you, Matthew. Yeah.
No, that's a really interesting idea. Is that something you've seen elsewhere, Wes? Like when you've been driving around maybe another state or country?
Oh, I don't know. I've made that point to the government ministers here many times that nothing ever changes. So I think that's often a revenue raising thing. I remember the chief of police here years ago saying that he drove up the Stewart Highway from Darwin City, and there were so many changes of the speed limit that he got confused. Now, If he gets confused, well, what about us, rest of us poor suckers?
Absolutely, and I think with this 30 kilometres an hour issue that we're raising here, it should help clear a bit of that up. So you won't have both 40 and 50k zones in your neighbourhoods. It'll all be 30. Wherever you are in a neighbourhood, if you're in a suburb, as long as it's not an arterial road, which the speed limits will remain high, it'll be 30. And so you'll default know that if you drive down a residential street, that's 30 k's an hour.
There's a few more texts coming in for you this afternoon, if you don't mind taking a few questions without notice.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yep. I've got Trevor. Where are you, Trev? Hello, Trev. You're in another suburb. It's called Tiwi, Matthew, and you wanted to talk about a survey.
Yeah, I read in the paper somewhere over northeast of UK, they'd done a survey and they found that all accidents happen with 1 kilometre of where people live. So the end result was they all shifted.
What? What do you mean they all shifted? To where? Hello? Oh, Trevor's disappeared.
But, he might have dropped off. I
yeah.
can talk to that one. That's really interesting in terms of where crashes happen. The vast majority of crashes occur on 50 and 60 kilometre an hour roads. So particularly those 50 kilometre an hour roads, it's a really big win to reduce those number of crashes, because it's when you get hit at 50, you've only got a 10% chance of survival as a pedestrian. But if you reduce that down to 30, it flips and you've got a 90% chance of survival. So it's a big safety thing. And one of the things you talked about earlier, Laurel, it's not just about safety. It is about other things in terms of livability. And one of those things is improving shopping streets. So we know that shopping streets, if somebody wants to cross the road to go to another cafe or cross the road to go to a different shop, having to cross a 50 kilometre an hour road or a 40 kilometre an hour road can be quite daunting. And you might have to go up to the traffic lights, and we know that people just aren't going to do that just to pop across the road. So it's a default speed limit in shopping streets of 30 kilometre an hour, where everybody just knows, it's 30 k's right across the country. That's what we're aiming for, to try and get people back out and spending in local shops.
Another text has come in here. I have no problem with school zones and slow zones like that when there's actually children around. At 7:15 in the morning, the school areas are deserted, and again at 4:30, the school is also deserted. And this person says that they got pinged along Kavanagh Street at 7:15 in the morning, which is in the city, doing over 10k an hour, the limit, because they had no idea that it was a school zone, and they got somewhere in the vicinity of a $745 fine. So it does also come back to education and that idea that it is revenue raising for the government.
It's a really big jigsaw here. We've got speed limits as one piece. We've got education and telling people about speed as another thing. We've got one, trying to encourage pedestrians to be a little bit safer around the road. That's another thing. But we can also design roads that are safer for people. The idea that we had on earlier with the little speed bump, just to tell people that you're changing speed limits. That's a really interesting idea. We've got all sorts of ideas across the world where you can even change the colour of the street, which is what they're doing in Perth. They're changing the streets to red.
Really?
To indicate that, to indicate that the road's a residential road and that everybody should take care, and there might be kids playing in the street. They're calling that safe, active streets in Perth. And so there's really cool things that we can do that hopefully don't end up just becoming a revenue-raising activity, but also become something that really does improve safety and also livability.
Well, Matthew, thank you so much for having a chat this afternoon. I have to say that the text machine is exploding with people who want to keep sharing their ideas with regard to limits. Most people just looking at this arbitrary are not for it. I do have Woz, who is in his truck. He continually drives around. Woz, what did you want to share?
I was just thinking, we don't really have the pedestrian traffic that your guest is talking about. People just don't walk in Darwin. It's too hot. unless it's right in the city centre, I don't think it'd make significant difference to most of Darwin. And bloody mums with kids on board don't go 40k in the school zone anyhow. How are you going to make them do 30?
Yeah. What's your reaction? Thanks for that, Wes. What's your reaction to that? It is incredibly hot in Alice Springs and in Nhulunbuy and Katherine. Not a lot of pedestrians around anyway. Maybe the 30Ks would just be frustrating.
No, that's a really good point. And it is hot, and people aren't going to go on big, long walks or big, long, hikes to get somewhere. But a little walk to, people that can't afford a car, then have to get to a bus stop. The little walk to the bus stop, let's make that safer. Let's make cycling to the shop that's 2 kilometres away a little bit safer. Let's, there's lots of little journeys that can occur. It's not necessarily big journeys that we're talking about here. We're only talking about those residential streets. And one of the things, it might just be nice to be able to use our streets like we used to be able to. And that's what they're trying to go for in Perth with this Safe Active Street. We're trying to get the kids back out playing on the streets and, interacting with the environment around them and learning while doing in terms of road safety, when to look left, when to look right, when to watch out for traffic. And the best thing that I can say here is that it really doesn't affect overall journey times by any more than a minute. It's a very negligible difference because we do not spend a lot of time driving on these types of streets. We're only talking about streets that are in residential neighbourhoods, school zones, and high pedestrian areas like shopping streets.
Matthew, PhD candidate at the School of Medicine and Public Health from the University of Newcastle. A very, very contentious issue, and I thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts this afternoon.
No worries. Thanks for having me on, Laurel.
There are